Welcome to Gordon Cornwell Consultants Limited. Today we will be discussing on dealing with harassment. Stay tuned.
We expect you at the end of this session to be able to discuss the types of harassment in the workplace, develop an effective workplace harassment policy. We'll also be able to discuss the impact of harassment in the workplace. And lastly, we'll be able to deal decisively with harassment in the workplace. Let's look at this definition of harassment. Workplace harassment basically occurs when an employee or a group of employees feels threatened or get belittled by their colleagues. So harassment here has to do with when you feel threatened as an employee or you get belittled by your colleagues. And the major purpose of workplace harasser is to make victims feel unsafe and uncomfortable. So workplace harassment goes by various names. You will hear some people call it workplace bullying. Some will call it mobbing. Some will call it workplace aggression. When we talk about harassment, this is one area that a lot of us don't really take too serious, especially the HR. Because most of the harassments that we have comes in form of a covert nature. So people don't take seriously to it. But I tell you, it is one aberrant behavior that we need to really do away with in the workplace. By the time we are done, you will see that probably most of this behavior you have been, carrying out in the workplace, which you did not know, you will know today that it might constitute harassment. Okay. Now let's look at the types of harassment that we might have in the workplace. We have verbal harassment. We have psychological harassment. We have stalking. We have bullying. We have cyberbullying. The one that you are very conversant with is the sexual harassment. We have the physical harassment. We have religious harassment. We have racial harassment. And we have disability harassment. So let's look at the types. Verbal harassment, of course, consists of demeaning slurs, offensive gestures, unwarranted criticisms, hurtful jokes, and comments in the workplace. This is very difficult to detect, and as such, we employ HR personnel to be very vigilant to note such harassing behaviors in the workplace. The second one is what we call stalking. This one, stalking, has to do with following your victim all over the place. You won't give that person a breathing space. And come to think of it, we see that in our workplace, especially maybe you found a new lovebird, and probably you checked and the person said no. So everywhere she goes, you will be there. You become the MC, and everywhere I go, invariably, what you are doing is stalking that person. And it's a form of harassment in the workplace if you don't know. So stalking can be described as a repeated unwanted contact that makes the victim feel afraid or distressed. Then we have the psychological, or what we call the bullying harassment. This one is more covert and consists of tactics like you need to watch out for: withholding information, taking credit for others, achievements, making impossible demands, imposing impossible deadlines on employees, forcing people to work outside their job scope or description, and so on and so forth. All this one is simply called psychological harassment. This is a form of deliberate psychological bullying, and victims who face such harassment are more likely to suffer mental breakdown, low self-esteem, and tends to undermine themselves. This is what you find under psychological harassment. So it's a form of bullying. We have the cyberbullying, of which some of us here are very accustomed to. At times it is called digital harassing or harassment. It is the newest form of harassment. Digital harassment includes posting threats or demeaning comments on social media, trying to create a fake person or character to bully someone online, creating a web page about a victim to mock and belittle such victims, or make false allegations online. All these ones are bullying. The other one you are very accustomed to is what we are very used to, sexual harassment. And you will see what constitutes sexual harassment, so that when you are carrying out this aberrant behavior in the workplace, you need to be very careful. Although sexual harassment in the workplace is a heinous crime and more common than you might think, now a person belonging to any gender can be victim or perpetrator of sexual harassment. Anybody. It's not only the male alone. The female gender too in the workplace can do that. So what are we talking about when we talk about sexual harassment? We are looking at unwanted touching, sending obscene messages and videos, asking for sexual favors, comments including vulgar gestures are a few signs of sexual harassment. So when you commit unwanted touching, that is sexual harassment. You can see what happened recently. It is still, the case is still on. The Spanish women's national side just won the World Cup. And in celebrating them, the president of their football association went and kissed one of those ladies directly in the mouth. And of course, the whole world went crazy. It has not been seen before. That is a form of harassment, sexual harassment. So this is rampant, but at times, since it is covert, it might not, HR people or personnel might not be keen on raising such issues, except the complaint comes from the person that is being harassed. Then we also talk about the physical harassment. This includes improper touching, improper, when you touch people in their clothing, their skin, the physical assaults, threats, violence, or damaging personal property in the workplace. This is known as physical harassment. So for you, when you have issues with one of with a colleague, and you result in fisticuffs, you want to fight, of course that's harassment. It's physical harassment. And you know definitely in the civil service, once it has been clearly shown that you're fighting in the workplace, is summary dismissal. Now, people belonging to gender minorities and LGBTQIA, of course, are more likely to face such kinds of harassment at workplace. When we talk about LGBTQIA, We are talking about L stands for lesbian. We are talking about gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex and asexual. These are the people that suffer most in the workplace. Then we also talk about religious harassment. This one, we see it all the time. This one has to do with discrimination based on religious beliefs or offensive remarks about someone's religion. Racial harassment, of course, has to do with series of incidents, things that do happen in the workplace based on your ethnicity or your racial origin. In the workplace, there are certain people, we even still see high level of tribalism in the workplace. In the workplace, we notice that people get what they get, not because they are so good, but it is based on favoritism, nepotism, and so on. So you find ethnocentrism in the workplace. When this kind of thing happens, when people get things because they belong to a particular tribe or a particular ethnic group, then we call that racial harassment in the workplace. Then disability harassment has to do with when you begin to allocate resources in the organization based on people that are disabled and those that are not. You deny people that are disabled of what they are supposed to have simply because of their physical makeup. So, disability harassment involves unwelcome and offensive conduct in the workplace that is based on a person's disability. For example, promotion and so on and so forth that we find. When you see this kind of situation, it is called disability harassment, and we need to take note of that. But one thing that stands out clearly in this issue of harassment is that any serious-minded organization that wants to progress must have in place a policy, a harassment policy. That's they must institute a workplace harassment policy. This will go a long way into safeguarding people that are probably feel inferior or are unable to meet up certain demands in the workplace. Let's look at this, for example. In instituting harassment policy, what do we expect? And this is a task for the HR. If you are watching, please take note of this. Effective harassment policy, if you put it in place, is expected to state that harassment based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, and so on should not be or will not be tolerated in the workplace. Effective harassment policy should explain how employees can report harassment either to a designated officer or to any senior personnel. An effective harassment policy in your organization should be able to state that you will be protected for those that are reporting this harassment or for whistleblowers. You must clearly state that you will protect the confidentiality of the employees who report the harassment or participate in harassment investigation. It is very, very important. These are the policies that you must put in place. Another harassment policy is that you must state that employees will not be punished for reporting harassment, because when you punish them, nobody will want to report. But when you have whistleblowers that are reporting harassment, they have to be protected. And one outright issue again that has to do with when you want to institute harassment policy is the quick response to harassment complaints. You must provide quick response to harassment complaints as they come. And you must set up impartial investigation to clearly look at those harassment complaints. Then you provide for prompt and effective corrective and preventive action where necessary. When you are instituting a harassment policy in your organization, please consider requiring that employees who file internal complaints will be notified about the status of their complaint. If I have filed a complaint against somebody 2 weeks ago and up till now I've not heard anything, then it is not good enough. I as the person that has reported the harassment should be briefed. Then harassment policy should clearly describe the consequences of violating that harassment policy. It's very, very important. So most of the things we see in our organization where people are fond of harassing people is because there is no well laid down harassment policy in that organization. There should be a well laid down policy that every employee at the level of induction into the organization should be aware of. So how are we supposed to get it right when it comes to workplace harassment? In investigating workplace harassment, what are the things we need to really consider? One, you must receive complaints before you begin to act. So you respond to that official complaint, you go on a fact finding, you conduct interviews, you interview a lot of people, you write your report, and of course, you share the report finding with key shareholders, basically the management. Then disciplinary hearing and appeal will be set up, and the outcome of that disciplinary hearing will now be communicated. And of course, the consequences for harassment will be such that you have to comply with the law. It is very important when you are investigating harassment complaints. All right. So what are the impacts? What are the impacts of harassment in the workplace? You might find this very interesting. Harassment, if not properly checked, may lead to poor emotional, mental, and physical health outcomes, such as the person being harassed might go through some traumatic experience, depression, anxiety, or symptoms of stress disorder. Decreased company productivity, of course, will come up as a result of absenteeism, low morale, gossip, antagonism, tension, and loss of initiative. Let's say, for example, somebody who has been continually harassed in the workplace by the superior officers, and this has gone unchecked. That person, of course, will be traumatized. So when we talk about the impact of harassment in the workplace, looking at the physical and emotional impact, it is all stated here. At times, people feel sick, you experience palpitation of the heart, severe headache, loss of libido, disturbed sleep, sweating, shaking. Then on the emotional part, you are anxious, always anxious. Don't forget the last time we talked about anxiety disorder. It could lead to the anxiety disorder, irritability, panic attacks, depression, lack of motivation, lack of confidence, feeling of isolation, and reduced self-esteem. So the impact of harassment in the workplace is so great that it has become necessary, it has become expedient for HR personnel and management to really look into these issues of harassment. They occur every day, but because nobody talks about it, it goes that way. And the person that is harassing whosoever feels, yes, there's nothing anybody can do about it. Now, how do we deal with workplace harassment? There are two ways of dealing with harassment in the workplace. One is prevention. As part of the prevention, of course, is instituting harassment policy. When there's a policy on the ground, people will be careful. If such policy says that, look, if you are caught, if you have been found to contravene the policy, you will be terminated. People will be careful. So the key to dealing with workplace harassment could be seen from two perspectives. They could be seen from two perspectives. One is prevention, and the other one is remediation. Remediation comes from remedy. And let's look at the first one.
Stay tuned for part 2. Thank you for watching. Kindly follow us on our social media handle.